throws. It's a C-Mac attack. McCaffrey, one man to beat.
This is Desmond Johnson on the Bleav and Carolina Panthers podcast, here on the Bleav Podcast Network, the #1 podcast network for professionals. Do you believe? If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and rate the show on iTunes. We're available in your favorite directories: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Luminary, and TuneIn. You can also find us at Bleav.com and at Bleav Podcast on Twitter.
And welcome into the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast, brought to you by the Bleav Podcast Network. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson, joined by my co-host, Sports Illustrated Schuyler Callihan. You can follow him for all the latest on the Carolina Panthers and Charlotte Hornets at Callihan_ on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Dez, that's DEZ_3505. We got a lot to cover today. For those asking, yes, we've been hyping the triumphant arrival of Panther legend Thomas Davis. Scheduling conflicts. Preseason's nuts. We were just talking about it off the mic, how we're still putting together when we're going to do this during the week because of our commitments to other things. And Thomas is a busy guy. He's with the NFL Network. He's with the NFL and CBS and all these other things. I promise we will have Thomas Davis with us here shortly as we motor through this 5-week long preseason. The Panthers defeating the Washington Commanders on Saturday in preseason week 1. We'll get to that in just a bit. Myself and Schuyler will give you our takeaways from that game. The Panthers are doing joint practices with the New England Patriots for the next couple of days, leading up to them playing on this Friday in New England at 7 p.m. We'll talk a little bit about that. We got some audio from head coach Matt Rule regarding the offensive line and much, much more. So definitely sit back, buckle up if you're a Carolina Panther fan. We're one of your main sources for Carolina Panthers news and insight throughout the week. First, before we get into all that, though, let's talk about our main sponsor, and that's Bet Online. Our partners at Bet Online continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find out all the latest odds, news, and sports developments for the NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball, fights, and NFL futures. Bet Online is your continued source for all sports wagering needs, including live betting and the fan favorite Vegas casino and poker games. Really easy to get started. Just head over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up and use our promo code Bleav, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. And where we will start are our main takeaways from the Panthers' victory over the Washington Commanders. A little drama there at the end. Field goal from Zane Gonzalez wins it. Panthers are 1-0 in preseason, but of course we all know that doesn't really matter. Preseason is just glorified scrimmage to me at this point. And Schuyler, I actually made a point to make sure I wasn't in the house when the game was on because I wanted to listen to the radio broadcast. I do a lot of high school football play-by-play, college play-by-play, and stuff like that. And I wanted to hear the new Carolina Panthers announcer, Anish Shroff, and see how he went. And it was pretty seamless. Broadcast sounded great. But I jotted down a couple of takeaways that I took from listening to the game. I'll turn it over to you first. What was one of the main takeaways you took from seeing the Commanders take on the Panthers on Saturday afternoon?
You know, that's tough because, I mean, like you said, it's just there's not much to really get out of this, especially this first preseason game when there's limited reps for the ones and twos. But I would say just those first two drives by Mayfield and Darnold, I think they both – handled those series pretty well. They moved the ball down the field. They got the job done. They got points on the board. And I think, too, just the level of urgency was there from the get-go. I think, sometimes you can fall asleep walking into these games just because it doesn't really count. And especially those ones and twos, they know that nothing's really on the line for them. But I think for the most part, level of urgency was there and, attention to detail was there. I just think they were there to win the football game, and that's something that we probably really didn't see much of last preseason, where it felt like a lot of guys were still trying to buy into, the culture. They were still trying to buy into the system, the scheme, and also fighting for positions because there's a lot of uncertainties back then. But this year, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, that was one of the vibes that I caught where last year felt like everybody was kind of learning. This year it almost feels like there's more camaraderie amongst the team. Like it's almost palatable. You can almost see that they're kind of gelling into something. I don't know what. I'm tippy-toeing around like phrases because I don't know exactly what they're molding themselves into, but we've heard multiple players talk about it. The one thing in this tenure of Matt Rule that I think both of us have said is that the players don't seem to be turning against Matt Rule at all. If anything, it feels like they've bought in the longer they've been here. And this year, I feel like it's almost like a culmination from what we've seen so far, where it feels like, you know how it is when you learn a new job or something, you're slow at first when you learn it, but once you learn it, you can almost do it just off of repetition and muscle memory. And that's it feels like they're crossing that hurdle where now they're starting to do things not thinking about it. So the game is slowing down for them. There was a couple of defensive plays where it felt like, 3, 4, 5 guys are swarming to the ball in like a base 4-3 defense. It's just fundamental football that I was watching. So I was pretty impressed with that, that they're turning it. It feels like it's more of a team from what I'm seeing from the practices and the preseason, as opposed to a collection of players. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all gelling, they're all communicating, and I think that's one of the biggest areas you're going to see a major difference in this year is just the communication, especially defensively. Xavier Woods, that's somebody that they've talked about from the GM, the head coach, players on down. Like, that guy is an elite communicator, and it gets overlooked a lot in football. Everyone just looks at talent, but as you saw last year, they could have a really talented defense, but if you can't communicate, and especially in certain areas of the field in certain situations, you're not going to be that great of a defense. Panthers had a good defense last year, but they weren't great.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing that held them back from being great, was the lack of communication, being on the same page. Having Xavier Woods back there, that allows Jeremy Chin to play more freely, allows him to be more aggressive. And I think just having that quarterback of the defense back there, that opens up so many things. And I think even on the offensive side too, I get they're going to be, throwing a bunch of different offensive line combinations out there, a bunch of different receivers, and obviously the quarterbacks. But I think for the most part, it's gone fairly smooth. Like, obviously they're still trying to work through some things, but I think you're starting to get a good idea as to who those guys are that are going to be contributing, whether it's in a starting role or backup role.
Yeah, one of the guys that I think I keep writing off, but his name just keeps popping up, and he just keeps popping up on the screen. Linebacker Frankie Louvu was one of the takeaways I took. I mean, it felt like he was calling his name like all day, and then I was listening to the radio broadcast. I was listening to the post game, and those guys in the post game were going on, and I can't remember who it was that said it, but they actually compared him to Thomas Davis and a little Sam Mills in there too, where it was just like, I don't know, just certain intangibles that they were seeing on the field for an outside linebacker. They were starting to compare Frankie Louvu to that. And I know he came on strong in the middle of last year, basically just kind of outworked everyone that was trying to make that squad in that position to stick around. And now it almost feels like they consider him a vital piece of that linebacker core, doesn't it?
You want me to make my bold prediction right now?
There you go.
I got it. I want to be careful too of how I say this, because obviously with a player like Frankie, there's still a lot to work on, a lot to develop. But I think there is potential for Frankie Louvu to be a star in this league. I really do. He's got the intangibles. He's got all the tools that you need. He flies to the ball. He's around the ball every single play. Even going back to last year, had very limited reps. But even in those limited reps in preseason, regular season, it seemed like every time he was on the field, he was either creating a fumble, blocking a punt, intercepting a pass, hitting the quarterback, around the tackle in the backfield for a loss. Like, he was always around the ball.
Yeah.
And to me, yes, they're going to miss Hassan Reddick, but I think they would have made even more of a priority to bring Hassan back. Maybe even throw more money out there, because we don't know the situation. Maybe they came to a certain point in negotiations there they didn't feel comfortable with it. But if they knew what they had in Frankie Louvu is going to be and maybe that's him becoming a star, maybe that's why they were like, okay, you know what? We're a little uncomfortable paying this much to Hassan Reddick. Let's see what Frankie Louvu could do in an expanded role. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but I think that the potential for him is there to be an absolute stud in this defense.
If I'm not mistaken, I think I read that the joint practices we're going to talk about here in just a bit between the Patriots and the Panthers that are going on right now. They finished today, and then they'll have another one tomorrow. Frankie Louvu intercepted a red zone touchdown pass from Mac Jones, I Bleav it was. The Patriots had driven all the way down to like the 12-yard line or something, and Louvu gets an interception to stop the drive. Always around, yeah. It's almost like a Bill Belichick type guy. Maybe it's like a Matt Rule type guy where he just has certain intangibles they like. We all know Matt Rule likes guys that can play multiple positions, can do multiple things. They're smart, they're disciplined, they play tough football. And for a while, it was really just word salad, until we started seeing some of those guys. And I agree. I think Frankie Louvu is one of those dudes. Between him, of course, a lot of starters didn't play Saturday, which we kind of expected. And as they were naming the long list of guys that weren't going to play, each one was like, yep, that's good. That's good. That's good. Like, I don't want to see any of them. Like, I don't want to see any of them in the preseason, especially Mr. Christian McCaffrey. You don't need to play. I think they already said he's not going to play in the preseason.
Put him on the shelf.
There's no reason for it. We know what he's doing. Plus, I saw him juke some Patriots defender earlier today in some clips. So he's getting some work. He's getting some reps in for sure. One of the takeaways I took from him not playing in preseason game number one, he doesn't need to play. And just from seeing him practice, he looks a little leaner. He didn't show up to practice or to camp this year with the big, gigantic tree trunk thighs that he has the past 2 years. I know he had said he had spoke to Marshall Faulk about conditioning and how to prolong his career. Because to be honest, Marshall Faulk is the one running back I think of when I think of Christian McCaffrey in terms of comparison wise. Roger Craig was a little bit bigger if I'm not mistaken, but in terms of being shifty and the type of runner that you are, the type of pass catcher that you are as a running back, Marshall Faulk's the closest thing to Christian McCaffrey, or Christian McCaffrey's the closest thing to Marshall Faulk that I've seen in quite some time. I think Christian McCaffrey can return to top 3 status in the league as a player, not just in his division, not just in the NFC, but top 3 overall. And if you don't believe me, go look at the fantasy football stuff right now that's plastered all over the place. Like, if you look at running backs that they're saying, you should go get, if he's not number 1, he's number 2, pretty much on all of these lists. But then again, everyone's like, Carolina has nothing. They have no talent. We don't know if they're going to win, blah, blah, blah. But Christian McCaffrey's at the top of all these fantasy football lists. And then guys he used to be compared to, like Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, they're all like mid-teens further down. Like it just – McCaffrey still they recognize what Christian McCaffrey brings to the table if he's healthy. And if he's healthy, that changes the fortunes of this team entirely to me.
There's one stat in baseball that I love to see. And I know that it may be calculated differently in other sports. They need to implement it in football, and that's WAR. And if you don't know what WAR is, it's wins above replacement. That is a stat that I think Christian McCaffrey would be leading the league in.
Oh, man.
Outside of quarterbacks, of course.
Yeah.
And I don't even understand how you would calculate it, but I think he alone would probably be worth, maybe 4?
I was going to say 4 or 5 wins, maybe.
5 wins? Like, I mean, if you take last year's team, for example, and say Christian McCaffrey's healthy for the entire year, maybe 4 or 5 might be a stretch, but definitely 3. I think 3 wins is definitely possible. Now,
if he's having a year like he did in 2019, where it's 1,000 yards receiving, 1,000 yards on the ground, I would be perfectly comfortable attributing 4+ wins to just having McCaffrey, because he changes everything the defense has to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. I think if he's healthy, this is a team that will be right in the mix going into the winter months. But again, that's going to all come back to the offensive line is as good as advertised, or as good as we think it's going to be, and turnovers. Are they taking the ball away enough, which they didn't really do last year? And 2, are they limiting turnovers, something they did too much of last year? So it's all going to come down to quarterback, offensive line. But if McCaffrey plays 12, 13, 14 games, I think you like your chances. But anything less than that, it's going to be tough. But at least this year, I think they have some insurance. Like Chuba Hubbard going into year 2, he's a much more complete back than he was a year ago. His contact balance is much better. His pass protection is better. He's still working on catching the ball in the backfield. That's still a little bit of an issue. But you have Deontay Foreman too. So I think they like the insurance that they have behind CMC. It's just the the idealization of having those three healthy for an entire year, that's a three-headed horse. Whoever wins that quarterback job, obviously Baker Mayfield, but is going to be very happy having those three guys behind them because they can just lean on that run game and open up everything else.
And again, having McCaffrey out there makes everybody look better too. Compare the Panthers first.
Make you
Oh, yeah, a lot better. So hopefully, they got a plan for him to keep him upright, keep him in there, and he looks really good from what I've seen in practices or whatnot. He was actually on Sports Center, the noon Sports Center earlier today, and I listened to him get interviewed. He seems like he's in a good place and ready to rock and roll. You mentioned turnovers and the issue that they had with turnovers last year where they just couldn't get any. They did that early in the Washington game, actually. The second and third string guys that were out there, you could tell that the whole defense is getting preached to this, but that set up the actual touchdown. Baker led them on a long drive down for the field goal that started the game. And then the defense caused a turnover, which led to Sam Darnold scoring, passing a touchdown in the red zone. I mean, they basically gifted him an opportunity to score. So he only got 3 or 4 plays, but then you got to go back out there again because Baker got a longer drive. It does seem like they are leaning towards Baker being the starter week 1, which is what we all kind of knew was going to happen when he got here. I do want to say this, though. I made the mistake again of going on Facebook and looking in groups and just seeing what people are saying. It's horrible. It's horrible in there. It's just a cesspool. And I was questioning why people were questioning why Coach Rule and the coordinators were making these guys work for their starting positions. Like they were questioning, why isn't Icky starting at left tackle immediately day 1? Why isn't who was another one? I can't remember. That was the main one, was Icky. Why are they not doing it? And then in the preseason game, it's like, well, why aren't any of these people playing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, what are you?
The big one. That was the big one.
I'm like, what do you mean? Why do they need to play? They're like, can somebody explain to me why we've got 20 people not playing today? And like, it's preseason week 1. Like, they don't need to play. They already know they're going to play in September. But the whole thing with Icky, I just thought was strange because to me, I'm like, I kind of think it's refreshing that, yeah, he was a top 10 first round pick. But that didn't necessarily mean they were going to gift wrap him in the left tackle position. They've actually made him work for it. And today, after the joint practice with the Patriots, head coach Matt Rule actually talked about that, about Icky starting and their mentality in terms of what they were going to do to get him to where ultimately he is now, where he's been named the left tackle after that week 1 and then a couple of practices. Here's head coach Matt Rule, courtesy of Panthers.com.
We wanted Icky to play and put it on tape in a game before we put him with the ones. I know lots of people have asked me that, but we wanted him to go in a game and play and then earn, sort of, hey, with his play. And so he played well in the game. And so these are valuable reps for him. So, there were some plays that were good. Probably there's some plays I know that weren't very good. So, he's going against Judon. They got good players over there. So it's a good rep for him.
So everybody calm down. Icky's going to probably be the left tackle week 1. I mean, we kind of assumed he was going to be because they weren't going to push him into left guard. If anyone was going to get pushed to left guard, it was Brady Christensen. I think, Schuyler, that the coaching staff didn't realize how good Brady Christensen was until towards the end of last year. And then they still weren't convinced. And when one of those top left tackles kind of fell in their lap, they kind of got forced to, well, we need to get one. Because remember, we were sitting there trying to figure out how they were going to get one. And by the time they picked, I think there was 2 or 3. They were just sitting there for them to choose. Yeah. So we're like, what? So they get the top lineman in the draft. And it creates a situation that I guess it's a good situation to have where you go from having an offensive line that's being ridiculed around the league to you got 2 guys now. People forget Pro Football Focus rated Brady Christensen the highest rated left tackle, like in their rating history or whatever, when they did it right before the draft last year. But Matt Rule said his arms were too little or small or whatever it was. He wasn't playing them in the beginning. But then by the end of the year, they're playing the younger guys. He impresses. And then today after practice, Matt Rule went on about Brady and what they're going to do with the left guard position. Because right now it feels like it's between him and guard Michael Jordan, not from Chicago Bulls fame, but from Charlotte, North Carolina Panther fame. Here's Matt Rule again from Panthers.com, courtesy of Panthers.com, talking about the shuffling on the left side of the offensive line.
Yeah, I think that's where we are moving forward. So we I think Brady's probably one of our most improved players on this team. So MJ, Brady, they'll continue to battle it out. MJ, and then Brady can also play out at left tackle. So getting Dennis back was good. So we have some depth right now. We'll hope that Bozeman's not out too long.
Bradley Bozeman got dinged up earlier today in the practice, so we'll check with him. Elflein's been playing center since Bozeman's been out, but that's been a battle to watch. But I thought it was interesting that they're still making Brady kind of battle for it, but it feels like this is by design. Like they're making these guys fight for these positions so that they savor them more when they win them, as opposed to just handing them positions and them feeling entitled and maybe not playing up to par. The one thing I noticed on Panther Twitter today when I sat down to prep this, the ones that are either up in New England or have some sort of way to see what's going on, they all were like, from David Newton all the way down, Joe Person from The Athletic, they were just all like, the Panthers just had more juice today. Like when they came out on the field, like they just seemed like they were hungrier than the Patriots were to start the practice. And they ended the practice. I think there was 2 fights today. They ended the practice with a couple guys got ejected from the Panthers. I was going to ask what was going on in New England, because if I'm not mistaken, they don't have coordinators, right? Like it's just like a room of coaches, or what are they doing?
I really don't know. I know
they don't have an offensive coordinator named. It's like Joe Judge and Matt Patricia just kind of co-doing it, sort of.
It's like a co-coordinator situation, but I still think Bill has his hands all up in that. So I don't really know what that situation's like. But I mean, I think really we're going back to the offensive line situation, like Brady and the Icky thing. So again, they're making them earn the playing time. If you look at the ones that they've been rolling out there, they had Brady at left tackle, which he ended the year as a starting left tackle.
Right.
Michael Jordan started a ton of games last year, so he's kind of earned the right to at least start training camp at left guard. Elflein started most of the year last year with the team at center. Mm-hmm. And Bradley Bozeman just came in. Johnny Miller, who started most of the right games at right guard last year, he's not here anymore. So obviously they're just going to slide Austin Corbett in it. So they're going to have these guys earn their jobs. I'm telling you, by the end of this week, we're going to see Icky and Brady at left tackle, left guard with the ones almost exclusively. Yeah. So, and it's the same thing with the quarterback thing. And Matt Corral, everyone's getting upset about why didn't Matt Corral get in before P.J. Walker? And then it became, well, why is P.J. Walker getting so much of a run? Listen, Matt Corral is not anywhere near ready to be playing in the NFL just yet. No. Like, we saw that on Saturday against Washington, and game reps, even in the preseason, you still have to be very careful, because even though it doesn't count, you're still putting him out there against an NFL team that's not your own. And if he has any bit of adversity and has any bit of struggles, it's going to get in that kid's head. You don't want to ruin his confidence. So I've almost come to the thinking, like, you know what? They may keep P.J. Walker longer than everybody else thinks, because he can be that guy that gets them through the majority of that middle portion of the games or the late portion of the second half, because they don't want to ruin Matt Corral's confidence. What he played on Saturday is probably the extent of what he needs to play in preseason games 2 and 3. He's just not ready, and that's okay. You don't need to force him into that situation when you have a guy like P.J. Walker who can continue to put his tape out there, and that can get you through those second halves.
I'm glad you brought all that up, because that was who I was thinking about, was P.J. Walker, because that was the other thing I saw online where people were like, why are they giving P.J. Walker all these snaps when he's not going to be here or whatever? Why don't they let Matt Corral play more or whatever? They both pretty much played the second half. Now, to Corral's defense, he was out there with third and fourth string offensive linemen.
Boy, he got ripped apart.
Yeah. There was no protection on a couple of those plays, because by that time I'd gotten back to the house and I'm actually watching some of the game, because Corral was in there and I wanted to kind of see this quick release that everybody been talking about. You can't see that on the radio. So I'm back in the house and I'm watching a little bit of it, and it felt like he was running for his life. Like pretty much every time he dropped back to pass, like it just broke down where he just didn't have time to really get set and throw it. That'll happen. I mean, again, you're playing with guys that aren't going to be on the team in 2 weeks probably. So
let's be honest, that offensive line he was rolling with was probably a very good resemblance of the starting offensive line.
That's
which
so
tells you how far they came.
Yeah, that does. It really does. Now, for those that were raving about PJ Walker's performance on Saturday, I don't have the stats right in front of me. I know he threw for like 130 yards, 139 yards, something like that. No touchdowns, which is typically a PJ Walker type of game. He'll get you from the 20 to the 20, but then we were having problems getting in the end zone. So for those that were saying that PJ should be a starter, because I saw some of those, PJ should be the backup quarterback. I saw a couple of those. He's always the most popular player on the team, the backup to the backup, pretty much, I guess, in this situation. I hate that PJ's not going to be here in about 2 weeks. He'll make the first cut. And to what you were saying, Schuyler, actually, I agree to that. They probably will keep him until final cut, just so they have that third quarterback that can take the majority of those snaps and not throw Corral out there with third and fourth string guys and maybe ruin his psyche a bit. Well, with PJ, he knows what the deal is. I actually had WRAL's Chris Lee on my Saturday morning show, the rundown this past week, and he was down at training camp in Spartanburg where you were last week, and he said he had been watching PJ Walker on the sideline, and he had noticed that he had a little bit of a different, vibe to him this year, where normally he's got a little bop to his step. He's hopping around in practice. He's pretty a pretty carefree type of guy. He said he kind of noticed that this year it wasn't like that. Like PJ knows he's going to be the odd man out. And if anything, I said he got all those minutes in the game on Saturday because they want tape. They want tape of him to help him find a team when he leaves here. So all this is by design. They're not doing it. It's not Walker versus Corral. Like, that's not what's happening. I think they're just trying to get through the preseason without major injury to a major position. We might see – how much do you think Baker and Sam will play on Friday night? Like, it's the second game, so this is kind of that third week that we were used to, but
I think it's going to be less than what everyone expects because you have the two joint practices, and then as both Matt Rule and Bill Belichick have said, sometimes you get more out of these joint practices than the actual preseason game because you're getting certain situations that you can control versus what you're going to get in the game. You have no idea what you're going to get in the game. Where in these practice situations, okay, let's do a 2-minute drill here for both teams, offense, defense, with the ones, then we'll do the twos. Maybe you want to do a certain situation. Let's say start with the ball at your own 28, and you have 58 seconds and one timeout. Like, you can create those situations and see what your guys can do in those certain settings where you have – it's just going to be up in the air in the preseason game. So, I think they'll probably get a couple of series. I'd say maybe 2 to 3 series each. But I still don't see it being like anywhere near a quarter or anything like that. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm wrong. But by the third preseason game, we may not see Baker at all. I think we'll kind of see a lot of those guys sit out, and that kind of be like the dress rehearsal, or this kind of be the dress rehearsal. Week 3 will be where a lot of those guys fighting for spots.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be 37 guys cut in that last wave of cuts. So there's going to be a lot of jobs that are going to be up for grabs. But, the whole thing with Corral, like, everyone's just – I get it. It's exciting to have a young quarterback that your team just drafted. But you got to keep in mind, too, this guy was drafted in the third round for a reason.
Right.
Wasn't a top quarterback. This quarterback class was not very strong anyways. The first one didn't even go to pick 20. So I just think when you look at Matt Corral, you can't look at him as he is definitely the future of the franchise. Like, if Baker Mayfield takes his team to the playoffs, I'm extending him. I'm sorry. Like, I'm extending him to a two-year deal, maybe a 3-year deal, and let Corral keep developing. And if Corral doesn't end up working out, then guess what? It's the same situation you had with Will Grier 2 years ago. He was also a third-round pick. Third-round picks are not going to be your for sure future. I think that's, if he was drafted in the first round, that's a whole different story. What's also interesting, though, is how the turnout of Kenny Pickett will be, because not only the Panthers passed on him, a lot of teams passed on him, and he fell to the Steelers number 20. He looked damn good. Now, I know it was against 3s and 4s too, but he looked damn good in his first preseason game.
Yeah, I would agree. And going back to the quarterback situation, one of the things I did write down was that Baker looked way more comfortable than I thought he would. Considering he just got this playbook,
a month ago,
a
maybe.
month ago. Yeah, and he looked pretty comfortable. I saw he dropped a 50-yard bomb to Shi Smith in this Patriots practice earlier today too for a touchdown. He seems like he is going to be the starter. It feels like he's winning over the team by his play, by his actions. And I think he's come in the perfect way. He didn't come in arrogant, because there was a lot of baggage following Baker Mayfield coming here that I didn't really understand, where it just seemed there was a narrative that he was immature and not completely about football, and all these things, all these negatives that were attached to him, even coming from the Browns. I mean, remember the Browns front office was saying that stuff was leaking out, that he was immature and needed to grow up and all these other things. I haven't caught a hint of that at all here in Charlotte over the past month. If anything, it seems like he's more determined to not give the media any kind of sound bites that can be used against him or the team or the Browns or any of that stuff in the past. It feels like he's just kind of working to rebuild his career, I guess, in a certain extent. And I agree. He has a great year here, takes the Panthers to the playoffs. Why would you not extend him at that point? You know, You don't need to give him 5 years, $240 million or whatever, but I would be fine giving him, 2 years, $60 million guaranteed or whatever. I mean, that's for a quarterback, that's cheap.
That's the interesting thing, because all these fans are going to come back and say, oh, so you're going to pay Baker Mayfield $30 million a year? Well, let's be honest, like, you're paying two quarterbacks right now $23 million.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to pay, like, it doesn't matter. I mean, even if if Matt Corral is your guy in 3 or 4 years, you're going to have to pay him. Like, you're going to be paying quarterbacks probably upwards of $30 million. That's just how the market is right now. So if you pay Baker Mayfield, 2 years, $60 million, like you said, you're not paying Sam Darnold $18 million next year. Like, there's $7 million that you're not going to be paying. So
Corral's on a rookie deal for the next 3 years after this. So
you're going to be fine.
Yeah, you'd be just fine. And that's not even like high level anymore NFL quarterback pay. Like, I mean, the high level quarterbacks are making 40 plus, Aaron Rodgers is making 50, I Bleav, this year. He's making $50 million this year and next. If I'm not mistaken, Dak Prescott's like at 45 or something like that. Pat Mahomes is around 45. Like, the top 10 quarterback, Kyler Murray's around 40 when his thing kicks in. $30 million a year for a quarterback, that's kind of middle of the road money now for a quarterback. So it actually would kind of fit. It would seem crazy, but it would kind of fit. And it would give the franchise peace of mind too, and the fan base, because we really haven't had a settled situation at quarterback really since 2017. So we're really going on 5 years of not having an idea of how well our quarterback's going to play. And even then, 2017, Cam was still the quarterback, but he got banged up throughout the season. They made the playoffs as a wild card, lost to the Saints on the road, and that's the last time the Panthers have made the playoffs. 2018, of course, is when the bottom fell out. They started like 6-2. Cam got hurt in Pittsburgh. They end up losing like the rest of those games or something to that effect. The following year, Cam hurts his foot in preseason against the Patriots. Actually, it was the third game of the preseason. Hurts his foot, doesn't play that whole season. It's the end of the road for Cam, end of the road for Ron Rivera, who we just saw Saturday with the Commanders. And it led us to where we are now with regime change and everything else. So I say all that to say that preseason just doesn't matter. You're more prone to get hurt or something bad to happen to your team in preseason than something great. Like, the only good story I can think of out of preseason ever is Victor Cruz, the Giants wide receiver that kind of rose from being like the last man on the roster to being eventually a Pro Bowler with the Giants. I can't think of any time else in preseason where something's happened or I'm like, that's why they do preseason. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't, I can't even think of one. And this Friday game, I'll be calling a high school football game Friday night, so I won't be able to watch it live. I'll have to catch highlights from it. But if it's any indication of what they did last week, I don't expect a lot of starters to really play on Friday night either, because you're watching them all week against the Patriots, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm saying, like, they may get 2-3 series max, but yeah, I mean, they're doing a lot of heavy work today and tomorrow in these joint practices. So don't expect them to see much on Friday. And again, like I said, they may not play any of them in that final preseason game.
And I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. I never watched week 4. Well, now it's week 3. I never watched that last one anyway. Again, most of this stuff is for like the last, I don't know, we say 4 or 5 roster slots, really. Like they're just kind of figuring out that back end and then practice squad. So it feels like they kind of know what they're doing. Like, you know, that's strange to say, but it feels like they kind of have a plan. Like they know what they're doing. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's August and like everybody's 0-0. I just feel really optimistic about this team. Like last year, I don't remember feeling this optimistic going into the season. Like they had holes.
Yeah, I think last year we knew it was basically the defense. We knew the defense was going to be good. Christian McCaffrey, if he's healthy, will help. At that point, we kind of already knew, you know, DJ Moore, how good he was. We thought Robbie was going to have another good year. And it was really about Terrace Marshall giving the quarterback another star receiver. We thought that was going to be like a 3-headed monster receiver. Didn't happen. The offensive line we knew was going to be garbage. So it was kind of like it kind of played out to what we thought it was going to be. Maybe a little worse. Maybe I think me and you probably had like at 6-7 wins maybe going into the year.
Yeah, I think we were assuming we were going to have McCaffrey the whole year. That's what kind of messed up everything.
I mean, I think this year you've got improved offensive line. The defense is back and better. They're playing more confident. You have Christian Mack healthy. You actually have somebody that's been successful at quarterback. So there should be some hope. I think anybody that's not hopeful or optimistic at this time of year, they're crazy. They're just pessimistic.
I know a few. There's a couple fans of other teams that are just like not looking forward to this season beginning. But for Panther fans are very fickle and they're very kind of go with the flow type thing. Like if Baker Mayfield goes out here and starts 5-0, we're going to see a bunch of Baker Mayfield jerseys around Charlotte. It's going to be Baker Mayfield mania. He's going to have the Geico commercials again and all that. Like all of it's going to start coming back. But if Baker comes out here and starts 1-4 or whatever, regardless of who they played, they will turn quick and ask for PJ Walker. They will say, we want PJ Walker.
They'll either want one of two things. They'll want Matt Corral or they'll want Rule fired.
Yeah. There's that contingent that's still waiting to hop back on that again.
The biggest thing for fans this season, and I know it's tough because you want to jump right back on that bandwagon. The moment this team loses a game, you can't get flustered and say, let's fire Matt Rule. The minute they go and lose their second game, you can't do that. The only time that I would say would be okay to start thinking that is if this team just absolutely hits the what right out of the gate. Let's say they start 1-5, like you say, or 1-4. If they start 1-4, the pressure is going to be starting to turn. And if he doesn't start winning some games right after that 1-4 stretch to start, yeah, the seat's going to get a little warm on the buns. But I think if they start, 2-3, if they have 2-3 losses in the first 6-7 weeks, 5-6-7 weeks, like there's no panic. If they hover around 500, if they're 5-5, I still think he's fine. You can say your opinion about what you want, but I'm not firing the guy for 5-5.
Yeah, I mean, and again, he was hired for was a 7-year deal. Like you don't fire a guy you signed to 7 years in year 2. Like you hire him with the intent. You understand it's going to be a long-term process. You don't get impatient in the middle of the process you described to him when you hired him and tell him, well, I told you I was going to give you a long period of time, but
that's just that business. That's
horrible. But he doesn't seem like the type that would do something like that. And we haven't seen an indication that he will.
What? I probably shouldn't say this.
But
we can't sit here and say 3 years in he wouldn't fire a guy for doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. But I mean, he does have $170 million worth of steel in the ground in South Carolina. And then
that's true. And walked away basically like just threw his hands up like, well, I guess I just bought a bad dinner that night and I'm going to be out that money. But I will say this, though, by all indications, as we wrap this up for this week, I don't think this team can start 1-4 unless like there's just a catastrophic, injuries or just something. It just feels like they're the general sum of all the parts. They're not a bad unit in terms of like the roster. When you go up and down the roster, you're looking at it like this team should be able to win some games. And even Belichick in his comments after today, how close to the vest Bill Belichick is. He doesn't really give you much of anything. And he was like, the offense is super talented. Defense is really, really good. Like, he was going on and on about stuff. He's like, this is why we wanted to practice against him. It's a good sound team, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And I was just listening to some of the stuff he said. And Bill doesn't give those kind of compliments out just because you practice against him. Like, if he didn't have anything good to say about your team, he just wouldn't. He'd just have, muted. Well, we had a good practice today. We'll out there and we'll do it again tomorrow and see what happens. I'm not willing to say much else right now. Like, he would do like that. Like, that's all he would do. Like, he wouldn't say anything else. So for him to say that the Panthers were super good or whatever, that's about as much of a hug you're going to get from Bill Belichick as of anything. So I don't know what all that means, but we're going to find out. Like I said, Friday night, 7 p.m., the Panthers take on the Patriots week 2 of the preseason. I'm not sure how many people are going to play. We know McCaffrey will not be playing on Friday night, and we're both perfectly fine with that. I'd imagine they might start Darnold Friday night since Baker started. Maybe Darnold plays. Maybe Baker doesn't play at all. Maybe they have Darnold, play first quarter, or if Baker does play, maybe he just plays a series and he's out. And I thought that Rule said the day he was going to name a starter after the Patriots game. I thought he said that too in the press conference. So
he said it would be a telling week. He didn't really come out and specify, but he said Patriots week. After they get back from Patriots week, they'll have a very good idea. So,
and it seems like it's Baker because he started with the first team today, probably will tomorrow. It's like all the stuff people are complaining about that are fans on the outside. They're not understanding there's a method to the madness where they're ramping him up. Like, it's almost like fans feel like, well, he should have just had the first, reps to begin with. He doesn't know the plays. He's got to learn the playbook before he can get in there and do that kind of thing. It's just like, come on, guys, use logic here. They're doing the right thing.
Not only that, but like I see all these comments like, oh, we're going to keep the quarterback battle going on into week 2. Like, oh, this is ridiculous. This coaching staff is in over their head. Chill the heck out because like you're really going to freak out over 4 practices. We're a month away. Okay, let me take that back. We're a little under a month away.
Right.
We have 3.5 weeks until they kick off the regular season. I think they're going to be just okay if they let this thing supposedly go throughout the rest of this week. Baker, if he is going to be the guy, which we all assume he is, he's going to get most of the number 1 reps probably this week, most of the number 1s next week, and he'll have all the rest of August, the first 2 weeks of September. Like, there's so much reps for Baker Mayfield to have with the ones. It's okay. It's 3 or 4 practices. If you are Matt Rule, you want to be damn sure.
Yeah, you got to know. Yeah,
you have got to know. Like, this is your job right now. You've got to know that he's your guy.
It's like people are complaining about Matt Rule doing things where last year they're complaining he wasn't doing those things to achieve the results. Now they're complaining he's actually doing these things and it's not happening fast enough. And it's like everyone just needs to pause for a second.
It's August 16th. Like,
yeah, it's August. It's the middle of August. Like, we're still technically in summer. Like, we're okay. It's fine. Everyone's still 0-0. McCaffrey's still healthy. Everything's good. We're still in optimism land where things can be fantastic for the season. I wanted to save because we were going to do who's the defensive player you look to have a huge leap this year. We're going to save that for when we can finally pin down Mr. Thomas Davis. I swear we're not making it up. We're not making it up. Thomas Davis is going to be a part of the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast this season. With preseason and running around, and the Panthers are practicing at different times during the week, and Schuyler's got to be there for that. And then I've got stuff going. TD's got stuff going. We'll get it all coordinated for you, but he will definitely be in the house, and we'll let you know when he'll be here for that. We'll do the defensive player and the offensive player maybe next week. Because again, I don't know how much we'll be able to pull out of the preseason game 2 or whatnot. So we'll do that there. For the latest on what's happening with the Panthers, follow Schuyler on Twitter at Callihan_. You can follow me at Twitter, as you see below, at DEZ_3505. You can listen to previous episodes of the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast on any major podcast platform, including now the SiriusXM app, where all 32 NFL teams are represented with a Bleav podcast weekly. So for Schuyler Callihan, I am Desmond Johnson. You've been listening and watching the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast for the week of August the 16th. We will see you next week after preseason game 2. Keep pounding.